Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 815B, and today's date is November 11th, 2015, and the title of this episode is World War III is a Private Western Central Bank War, not a war of freedom or democracy. Before I get started, I just want to wish all those veterans who are celebrating today happy Veterans Day. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we know Obama created a memorandum, some people call it an executive order, to allow the executive branch, the agencies that report back to the executive branch, to allow illegals over the border, and their instruction is do not touch them, and then hand them working papers. Now, there was a judge that put an injunction on this. President Obama is going to ask the Supreme Court to clear the way for his long-delayed immigration overhaul. The Department of Justice said in a statement that it will appeal a federal appeals court ruling that blocked Mr. Obama to plan to provide work permits to as many as 5 million undocumented immigrants. And basically, they're pushing this forward. And what we come to find out is that there was a leaked agency memo from DHS which revealed that the federal officials are planning to evade a federal court order barring pieces of Obama's executive immigration actions. Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley led 8 others on the committee in a letter sent to DHS Secretary Jay Johnson last week demanding he clarify the document. The leaked memo states that a benefit of the proposed action would be to authorize the presence of certain individuals who are not here lawfully and address the needs of some of the intended deferred action population. The senators charged that such changes would directly violate a federal court injunction issued in February suspending Obama's plan to shield roughly 5 million illegal immigrants from deportation through expansions to a program granting extended work permits. The committee right now gave Jay Johnson until November 12th to respond to this. So it looks like they were going to basically ignore the Supreme Court and do what they wanted to do anyhow. And actually, this really shouldn't come as a surprise because Obama does this quite a bit. He has a paper, he has a pen, and basically he decides what he wants to do and what he wants to pass, what he wants to create without dealing with Congress whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying that Congress is any better because most of our government right now is bought and paid for, and there's corruption completely throughout the system at this point. But we can see they're all taking advantage of the corruption on either side, and they're doing whatever they want. And this is what normally happens during an empire that is crashing. The rule of law goes out the window. The elites do whatever they want, but they expect everyone down below, the serfs, to obey the laws. And this is what we're seeing right now. Now, out in Egypt, we understand that Russia has banned flights there, and they're saying that Egypt is going to lose about $280 million a month from the banned flights. And this is a lot of revenue that Egypt is going to lose. Now, Russia and North Korea, their military, they are now beginning talks and agreement on the prevention of dangerous military activities. And I think what Putin is doing right now at this point is talking to North Korea and saying, listen, the United States right now is going to try to provoke either us, Russia, or North Korea, or China, and we need to be very careful in what we do because they're going to try to make it seem like North Korea or any of these nations are trying to do something and then blame it on them to get this war started. And we know who the players are, where the United States is saying that these are going to be our enemies. It's going to be North Korea, Iran, Syria, Brazil, Argentina, China, Russia. It's always the same players. Remember, this war right now is not a war of people. It's not a war about freedom. It's not a war about democracy. This is a war about the private Western central banks keeping their system alive. Of course, they want the people to fight it, but this is really what it's all about. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Ukraine has only prepaid their gas for another 4 days. And once those 4 days are up, guess what? They are out of gas. And it seems like they've been running into these problems every single year. They're coming into the winter months. They've been storing gas in their underground tanks. And we'll have to see what Ukraine does at this point. But something very interesting in Ukraine. And we know the puppet government that was placed into Ukraine was basically created by the U.S. government. They spent a lot of money for the overthrow. And they had the people already set to go in there. Most of these people that were put into office are bankers or they're corrupt. And we can see right now there are more corrupt people that were put into special positions. Ukraine's finance minister, Natalie Jaresko, collected at least $1.77 million in bonuses from a U.S. taxpayer-funded investment project that she ran even as it was losing money. And this report is coming from Robert Perry. Before becoming Ukraine's finance minister last December, Natalie Jaresko collected the $1 million in bonuses, but her salary was supposed to be at $150,000. And this is according to the financial documents that he received from the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. Now, what we're seeing right now is that she used these funds that were going to UNICEF, USAID, and she handled the investments. And it didn't matter if the investment made money, lost money, she was always collecting. And then they took this person who committed this fraud and put them into a position of power in Ukraine. They granted Natalie Jaresko citizenship in Ukraine, and she became Ukraine's finance minister. Now she asks for billions of dollars from the U.S., from the IMF, to help out the country. And I wonder how much she's skimming off the top from this, because we know a lot of the money from the U.S. and the IMF has gone missing. And we see this a lot when the U.S. government goes into a country, installs a puppet regime. A lot of the loaned funds completely disappear. Now, it looks like someone tried to attack Russia's go-to gas pipeline with an underwater drone. An unmanned military underwater vehicle rigged with explosives was spotted on the seabed in the vicinity of the Nord Stream gas pipeline in the Baltics. And basically, they don't know who owns the drone. The national identity of the drone has not been verified. So far, they don't know who it belongs to. And I'm going to say this might have been put into place by maybe the U.S., not directly, maybe with some other organization that the CIA paid. Could have been Israel to start something and maybe start the war off here. And we can see they will do whatever they possibly can to push this war forward. Now, out in Finland, it looks like they're going to request a possible sale of 40 rocket pods from the U.S. And the reason why they're doing this is because this will help improve Finland's capability to meet current and future threats. Basically, they're talking about Russia or China or both, because as we know, all of these countries at this point are being scared into a war that really doesn't exist, only in the minds of the U.S. government central bankers. And the U.S. government central bankers are trying to create this illusion that Russia and China are going to attack. Now, eventually, Russia and China will attack because the U.S. and NATO forces will make it so Russia and China do respond. Now, either this is going to happen through an event, which is a false flag, or they will provoke these countries until they get a response. We see Russia could propose a Saudi Arabia arms contract worth about $10 billion. Saudi Arabian King Salman is going to visit Moscow in the end of November, and a number of contracts worth up to about $10 billion is being prepared on his arrival. Iran right now is going to receive the S-300 air defense missile system before the end of 2015. And then they're going to receive the rest of the order in 2016. Now, out in Yemen, we understand that the U.S. is using Saudi Arabia as their proxy army. They're orchestrating the entire thing. And medical facilities in Yemen are being deliberately attacked, with some 100 incidents reported since the bombing of Yemen. And this is coming from the International Committee of the Red Cross. And they're saying this shelling was done deliberately, and they attacked surgical and medical supplies in the hospital. People have died, and right now it's getting difficult to basically perform any type of operation, help the injured, and this is all being done on purpose. I mean, look what happened in Afghanistan. The U.S. and the proxy forces go after hospitals, infrastructure, to put pressure on the people, so they go to the government and say, we cannot take this anymore. Please stop this. And it doesn't matter how many they have to kill. They'll keep doing it until they say, I give. Now, Russia out in Syria is intensifying their strikes. They've intensified their strikes in eastern Hama to protect the Syrian forces and to keep the supply route to Aleppo completely open. We know they've taken back a large portion of Aleppo right now, and they're pushing back the Islamic State from pushing west, and they keep pushing the Islamic State eastward. So we can see at this point the Islamic State is in trouble, and the U.S. knows this. And the U.S. has a new plan to create additional chaos within Syria. So the situation in Syria is most likely going to get worse. The U.S. government always sticks to its goals. It will never give up. It will never admit it is wrong, and they know they have to start a war. So they have a new scheme to make Saudi Arabia provide greater support to various Syrian opposition forces amid the Russian airstrikes. So even though Barack Obama said, yes, we need to fight the Islamic State, John Kerry saying, yes, we must destroy the Islamic State, we know this is not happening. The U.S. government can't officially challenge the Russian anti-terrorist campaign, so they have to go along with it, at least make everyone believe they're going along with it. But with the help of Saudi Arabia, U.S. intelligence services are working to further destabilize Syria using the hands of Saudi-backed rebels. So basically, the U.S. is keeping up the illusion that they're fighting the Islamic State, and they're having their proxy force, Saudi Arabia, have additional forces move into Syria to create more chaos. And again, the goal is to get Assad. That's their goal. We see the Air Force Secretary is out there saying that Washington needs boots on the ground. Air power alone is not going to do it. We need ground forces to occupy and govern parts of Syria. Now, we know we have the special forces in Syria. We know there's a lot of other troops in there already. And we know they're setting up a safe zone. This has been their plan from the beginning. And they're sticking with it. And this is why they need additional ground forces to hold certain areas and to tell everyone that this is a safe zone. And of course, this safe zone is the ability to take land away from the Syrian government, to give the Islamic State, the proxy army of the United States government central bankers, a place to regroup, resupply. And Russia right now, they are sending in special forces into Syria to track down and root out the fleeing Islamic State militants. A covert paratroop battalion has arrived in Syria, and they are preparing for an all-out assault on the Islamic State. So they're doing it with air power, and they're bringing in forces to help out with the Syrian armed forces. And Russia is very worried about additional U.S. ground presence in Syria. Remember, the U.S. was not invited into Syria. They invaded a sovereign country. We have boots on the ground now in a sovereign country. Basically, the United States has invaded Syria. And Russia is saying there's going to be some type of accident involving our troops, meaning that as Russia continually bombs, they're worried that a U.S. armed force person might be taken out with one of their bombs, because the United States would like nothing better than to have U.S. forces in the vicinity of a bombing and actually show it all over the corporate media that Russia attacked the United States armed forces. And this would put us into World War III. And this has been their plan. Now, it looks like the Syrian opposition has dismissed the draft peace proposal by Russia after 18 months of negotiating, because in it, it said that Assad was not going to relinquish power. And basically they said, you know something? There is no peace. There is no ceasefire. Now, we are always hearing about cyber attacks, cyber thefts, cyber espionage, and they're always blaming it on China, North Korea, and all of these attacks are always surface level. Ooh, they stole our names, they stole our phone numbers. And now we have a real cyber hacking that went on, which broke into JP Morgan Chase, the Dow Jones, and 10 other finance-related companies. And the data that they stole was used to run a pump-and-dump stock scheme, illegal online casinos, and other scams that netted them hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, who was it? Was it the Chinese? Was it Russia? Was it North Korea? No, because we would hear this all over the corporate media. The government would have been making a huge deal about this. No, it was 2 Israelis and others that joined in on this. Now, why didn't the corporate media, why didn't the government come out and say, ha, look, we've been cyber hacked by Israel, and we need to go attack Israel? Why didn't we place sanctions on Israel? Now, I'm not saying the Israeli people. I'm talking about the government, because this is what the government did to North Korea when they hacked into Sony and stole people's names and phone numbers, which we know this really didn't happen. But now they have the people. Jerry Shalom, 31, Ziv Orenstein, 40, Israeli citizens in custody, and other co-conspirators, allegedly using 200 different IDs, including more than 30 fake passports issued by the United States and other nations, to steal over $100 million. You can see at this point how the government works. When they want you to see an enemy that we're going to be going after, they make a big deal of it. When they don't want you to see something, they brush it under the carpet. Nothing to see here, move on. Now, out in Egypt with the Russian Metrojet, we see that the U.S. is requesting to have investigators come in and help with the investigation of the Metrojet. They're saying, well, this is a U.S. plane from a U.S. company, and we should have the right to come in and investigate. Well, it looks like Egypt is going to grant them this, and they're going to be able to go in and help with the investigation, which means they're going to bring FBI, CIA, and this investigation is going to go nowhere, so they can keep their propaganda that this was a explosive device from the Islamic State. Now, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it's very interesting that the U.S. is continually pushing to get in there to help out with the investigation. Now, Ted Koppel, he is issuing a very chilling warning to America. And if you don't know who Ted Koppel is, he is a news reporter, or he was a news reporter for ABC. And for more than a year, he investigated potential threats to our power grid, and he has detailed what he discovered in a new book entitled Lights Out. He is convinced that a massive cyber attack could take down the entire electrical grid. And he's been preparing by buying freeze-dried food, making his own freeze-dried food for himself, his children, even his grandchildren. And he's been asking the Department of Homeland Security, what do we have to protect ourselves? What do we have to counter a cyber attack? And Department of Homeland Security says we have absolutely nothing. And this is why he's very nervous, because everything that he's researched, he's saying that, yes, something could easily attack the power grid. And we know United States government central bankers, they are prepared and ready to do this. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be an outside attack. Maybe later on, once we're in war, Russia, China will try to use cyber attacks against additional power grids. But in the beginning, to get us into a war, this is the United States with a false flag, where they will make it look like another country has done this, so we can get into this world war. And remember, this world war is not a war of the people. It's not a war of freedom. It's not a war for democracy. It's a war of bankers, of private Western central bankers who do not want to give up their power. And they will fight to the very end. Oh, when I say fight, I mean everyone else, your children, your cousin, your brother, your sister, they're all going to be hiding in a bunker, letting you, the people, do their dirty work. But before they do this, they have to trick you into the war. They have to say, this country attacked. This is why we need to go to war, even though it was an inside job. And this is what we're going to see happen, because they can't come out and say, listen, the dollar's dying. We like to stay in power. And basically, you're going to be fighting over a piece of paper and ink. They can't use that. They have to make it look a lot better. They have to lie to the American people. They have to lie to the world, because the central bankers, they have no allegiance to any country, any group, any people. Their allegiance is to their central banking system, to their debt, to their profits. And when their system's dying and they want to restart it, they have to blame it on war. This is why all of this happened. And after the war is over, they'll emerge from their bunkers and they'll say, all these governments need to rebuild. Well, we can help you out with that. We can create money out of thin air, and we can give it to you, of course, with interest, to help you rebuild your cities. So they're going to profit during the war, and they will profit after the war. And this is why we have to stand up and say, we're not fighting this time. This is not a war for us. We're going to be sitting out. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.